Hello and welcome to JavaScript Marathon Training presented by This.Labs. I'm Sarah with This.Labs and I will be your host. We're kicking today off with Figma fundamentals for developers. Today's trainer is Hunter Miller, Senior Software Engineer at This. Welcome, Hunter, to JavaScript Marathon. You can find Hunter on Twitter using the handle shown at the bottom of the screen, HMillerDev. Please don't hesitate to get in touch if you have any questions or feedback. JavaScript Marathon would not be possible without our sponsors. Our sponsor today is This.Labs, your partners in modern digital transformation. We specialize in mentorship, consulting, training, and staff augmentation for enterprise organizations. Find out more at this.labs.com or send us an email at hi@this.co. This.Labs offers personalized training programs to suit your organizational needs, ensuring you and your company stay on the leading edge. If you find keeping up with constantly evolving technologies a struggle and want to bring your team up to speed on one of the latest technologies, contact us today at hi@this.co to set up your complimentary needs assessments. Check out these upcoming special events. We're rounding out our year with our last Global View meetup featuring Tracy Lee, our CEO, and Mike Hardington. More details are available at this.co. We also have our monthly mentoring session coming up in January 20th, 7 a.m. PST, 10 a.m. EST. And then we're back with Global View meetup, State of View, January 21st. Last but not least, JavaScript Marathon returns Wednesday, January 20th. Follow us on This.Labs on our Twitter for more details. And with that, I will hand it over to Hunter.
Hey, everyone. Hope you're all doing well. Good morning. I'm sure you got your coffee and get settled in. So today we're doing Figma fundamentals for developers. And the reason why I'm doing this talk is because, like, as a front-end developer, or even just any kind of developer, it's really important that we know how to work with designs, and it can really sharpen, like, even just your coding and your CSS. So I am a senior software engineer right now, but like I actually almost was a designer previously, and I actually started my career as a front-end developer at like a design agency, and we did like all kinds of stuff besides that, but I built websites and was surrounded by designers, and so like I really got a feel for like what it's like to be a designer, and I was kind of always interested in design. I really liked playing around with UI, like on the desktop, doing different themes and stuff like that. And so that is how we're going to start off today, which is that one of the first things I really got into with UI was World of Warcraft. So we're going to be building a forum today. And if you haven't heard of World of Warcraft, it's this really famous RPG that is online and you can play with other people. I think most people have heard of it, but in case you haven't, that's what it is. And I thought about doing like a really boring corporate kind of login form, and that seemed really uninteresting. So I thought, why not build something for WoW, since they just released kind of an expansion called Shadowlands, which is really fun. I've kind of been out of WoW for a long time, but this one kind of got me coming back. I come back for every expansion, but because I have friends who play a lot. But anyway, that's not important. So today we're here to kind of check out Figma. You can see I have it open here. One really cool thing about Figma is that it works in the browser, and I feel like that's important because it helps a lot of people access something that they may not have been able to before. It kind of just loads up and it's ready to go, which is a lot easier than like downloading a full program. But if you would like, you can use their desktop app. So we're going to actually do that. So I'm going to minimize this. You can just see Figma. All right. So like you saw here, we kind of have this like canvas, and you can see we kind of have this frame for the cover page, and we're here. Here's the start page. So you can see we have pages. A lot of times you probably won't need to actually work with pages. You'll just work on one page. But since I'm doing kind of a presentation, it's nice to have multiple pages. Underneath that, you can kind of see, we're starting to see like layers. So you see all the different like objects. And we also have this toolbar at the top. So on the left is like a menu, and just something to note, like I feel like I'm never using this menu. Pretty much all of it's covered by just like right clicking on something. So no need to really worry about that. The basic tool for Figma is the move tool. It's like your default tool. So you can actually like move things around. And once you're on something that's selected, you can actually do things like scale or rotate or, things like that. So the first kind of step for us is we're going to go over the basic tools. So you can see at the top here, we've got not actually that many tools, which is really good. And something that like I find is really important about Figma is that it really only lets you do what you could normally do kind of in a web app or like a native app. So the first thing we're going to do is kind of like make some text. So if you saw, we kind of had like a title on this page. So we're going to make that. And something to note on the text tool, if you make a text box, but then you don't type in it and you click away, then it disappears. So we said choose your own adventure generator. So you can see you kind of get a box for text, and you can just type in it. And then over here is kind of like our properties for every different like element or component. So we don't want Poppins. We want Frizz Quadrato, which is Blizzard's font. And it looks super old school, which is pretty cool. You can see there's like all these fonts. And something important to know is that you can actually work with local fonts if you're on the desktop app like I am, or there's actually a helper program which you can install if you're using the web app to load up all your local fonts. But they come with like, many of these are not fonts that I have on my machine. It's just loaded from Figma itself. So this is actually way too big. I think we had it closer to 24, which looks small here, but I'm really zoomed out. So to zoom, you can hold Control or Command and scroll, and then you get kind of zoomed in as you need. So text boxes, you can align the text inside to be left aligned, center, right. We're going to go with left, and we need to kind of shrink this down so it breaks to 2 lines, something like that. You can actually double click to just hug the text, or you can kind of set the box as you will. There's also some other settings to, you can make it fixed size, or you can actually make it grow kind of like on the web. So if we type a little bit more, you can see, that the box is growing as we type. So let's get that out of there. So we also had, the text was white. So on most objects in Figma, we actually have this fill, stroke, effects, and export. So with a fill, that's just going to be your text color. So you can change it however you want. You can go with white here, but you can see like it's loading some of the colors that are in this document. You can also do different color types. So you can do hex, or if you prefer RGB or HSL or HSB, or even just CSS. I'm not really sure. It's just like a property value. I usually stick with HSB. I feel like that's the most intuitive because you can play with kind of the brightness or just the saturation. So anyway, we're going to pick white, and that is pretty much it. Text has a few other things that kind of map to CSS. So here you have line height, so you can see, you can increase the space between lines. I think 100 is fine for this. You can also do letter spacing just like in CSS, make it really kerned out. I think it's interesting that they chose CSS names over kind of the traditional design terms like letting and tracking. I think that helps kind of push that mindset that this is very much kind of a technical tool. Now, paragraph spacing is kind of a cheat. This would be like a margin for each paragraph element. And then something that I wish worked as well as here as it does in CSS, which is this kind of vertical align. So you can do like align top, align middle, or align bottom, and align your text, relative to the text box. So that's cool. And then we can also see kind of more properties from this little kebab menu. So there's like decoration, alignment, again, paragraph indent, casing, and then like you can do super and subscript. But this is fine for us here. And so now we can show you like a box. So to me, the reason why I chose these three is because I feel like this is what the web is all made of, mostly text, boxes, and images. So for boxes, this is kind of like your standard div or, almost any element really. So we can kind of, and something I didn't go over earlier is that like you can see we have an X and Y coordinates. That's basically your coordinates in the canvas. You also have width and height. So that'll change based on, how you set the dimensions. But something that we had in this form was we had rounded corners. So you can do that in Figma with this nice little corner radius tool or property. So you can drag this if you want. Sometimes that's kind of hard to do. You can just type it if you prefer. You can also do like independent corners if you really want. So like if you really want to be edgy and like have this top right corner really sharp, you can do that. But for our purposes, I think just 8 is fine. And we also had kind of a dark brown color. I think that's the right color. Sometimes it's hard to find the colors if you have a lot of document colors. So that's a box. There's not much more to it. We'll kind of go over some of these as we go through the rest of this. So images, that's really important for the web for obvious reasons. So if you saw, I just clicked, let me do that again. That was too fast. So in this kind of box menu or shape menu, whatever you want to call it, you have rectangles like we just did. You also have lines, arrows. You don't see like a lot of these. You might use lines for things like horizontal rules, like I have here more as a vertical rule, but and maybe ellipses. The rest I don't use too much, but place image is obviously really important. So that's going to open up kind of your file browser. And here we've got an image from the promotion of Shadowlands. This is going to be huge. So let me scroll out and you can shrink that. All right, let me just move it first just to show you. So now we can take this and we can shrink it like we'd like. You may see that as I change the aspect ratio, it actually retains the image clarity or like fidelity. It doesn't actually distort the image by default, which is really good because it's really easy to accidentally like, just shrink an image a little bit and it starts to look off. So you can actually customize that in this image property. So if you notice, this is very similar to the rectangle menu because I think it really is just a rectangle with a different fill, with an image fill. And something important to note is that like Figma actually tries to make sure everything is retained and there's nothing that's destructive. So like you can do exposure or you can do contrast. And you can just mess with the slider, and if you just need to return back, you can pull it back there. You can also change to fit or crop. And so that's going to just fit to the box. Or if we do crop, you can actually kind of change which portion of the image that you want. Like if you want this little building, or maybe you want kind of this tower that's coming up into the sky, you can do that, and you can just close this. And now you have that and just that. And if you scale it, it'll retain that portion of the image. And something I didn't go over before was that, like, so you can, now if I drag, you can see it'll change the aspect ratio. So Command Z actually will return if you mess up. So, if you do something like this, you can just hit that. So let's say you wanted to scale this image, but you didn't want to, skew the aspect ratio, but you still wanted to keep the crop. Well, if you hold Shift and you drag a corner, you'll get kind of perfect aspect ratio of whatever your crop was. And that works across anything. So if we have this box over here and we want to keep it exactly this aspect ratio, you just hold Shift and you can drag, and it'll keep the box with that ratio. Okay, so that's kind of the basics and the tools that you'll probably use the most. So now we can move on to components. So one thing that's like really important in web, I feel like that we've discovered over the past 5 years, is that components really help us kind of encapsulate what we're trying to do and keep it like consistent, and just change like maybe one or two things about each one by passing in props or whatever. And so Figma is cool in that it lets you make components. So we're going to make a text style for kind of the form label. So we'll just choose a random size, and we'll choose a different font, Simplicita is Blizzard's kind of new font that they've been using. It's kind of this sans serif. So in the form, we had kind of a name field, but we didn't just want to have it like this. We kind of had it like semi-bold, and it was all uppercase. So I'm going to put the uppercase casing on it. That way, oh, sorry. One thing to note on Figma, if you're in the middle of editing text, you can actually like change the properties of the text where you're editing, kind of like you would in a normal program. So that's can be annoying. If you don't want to do that, if you just want to change it for the whole box, you can click off. And as long as you have it selected, then you can actually apply whatever properties you were looking to do. So now everything in the box will be uppercase, which is what we want. And we also had it kind of space out a little bit. I find like 4% is usually good, or maybe even 8%, depending on what you're doing, can work really well. And it was also very small, maybe like 14. And I think it's this color, but I'm not positive. Something like that. Okay, so now we have this form label, right? And I'll actually make it hug the contents of the label. Let's say we wanted to use this a bunch of times. We could just copy it. And so like if we do that, if you just Control-C, Control-V, or Command-C, Command-V, you'll have it. But if we change this one over here to be, let's say we didn't like this color, we really wanted to go with like a red. Well, now these two are separate. And sometimes that's desirable, but sometimes you'd really like them all to change because you want, you're changing your design system and something across the board, and you really want them all to kind of flow together. So we can actually do that. Let's delete this one. And if you just select something and hit delete, that will delete it, or you can right click and, well, I thought there was a delete in here. You may have to actually use this menu to hit delete. Anyway, so if you right click, you can actually see this create component menu option, or you can see it up here as well. It's these four kind of squares in a diamond shape. So what this does is it makes a component, and now it's purple, and you see this kind of filled in 4 dots on the layer over here. And so we can actually call this kind of a label. So now, if we were to use multiple of these and we wanted to change the color, sorry, wrong one. So first of all, you can just duplicate a component by hovering over it or clicking it and then holding Alt. You see this little double arrow. That means you're going to make a copy, and you just drag it out. You can also hit Control D or Command D, and that will give you a second one. So you can see over here on the layers that this kind of empty diamond means it's like a instance of a component. So this is kind of our home base component. So if we want to change the colors, we can, and it will match kind of across every instance of the component. Or, it applies to anything. So if we were to go in and change kind of the font size, well, now they're all going to be the same. So this is really cool and really helpful when building UI. There's so many things that we kind of duplicate, but to show it off, like let's say we didn't want name here. Let's say we wanted something else. So in the forum, we kind of had this favorite dungeon. So now, still instance of the component, but just with different text. And you can see that the box is actually not the right size. There is a way to fix that. And I want to say it's with auto layout, but don't hold me to that. Yeah. So that's a new feature of Figma. We don't have time to go into it today, but it's really nice and gives us a lot of kind of web benefits. So that's something to check out if you can. So that's a label, and we can now move on to kind of our input of the form. So what is an input? Well, it's generally a box. I don't see too many like circle inputs out there. And usually, well, it's either filled or sometimes it has like a stroke or a border. So here, we actually want a border. If we go back, you can kind of see we've got this border that's orange. So let's go ahead and make that. So we'll add a stroke, and now we get kind of this menu of options. This one being the color. So we have this kind of like corally color. And then we have like a number here, and this is the stroke width. So we actually just want 2 pixels, but you can go, as much as you want. And let me zoom in a little bit more. We had rounded corners. So I'll round the corners out, and 4 looks good. And so the last part is this fill. So we actually don't want to fill. And there's 2 ways you can like hide it with the eye. I prefer to just make it 0 in case like someone unhides it or something. Like I think this is just clearer that like we want this to be transparent. And then the other thing that we had on the input was an effect. It's kind of subtle. We can go back and look at it. You can kind of see like a little haze, drop shadow. I just went crazy with this design. I wanted it to be fun. So here we can add a drop shadow, and this is actually exactly matching the CSS properties for shadows. So you have X and Y. Usually for shadows, I like to do like 2 pixels off. I feel like that looks really good. I think 4 is good for the blur, but I think I had it like more of a purple at 100%. You can actually like, change this to be like 50 to be a little more subtle, but we'll go with 100. Okay, and then what's the last part of an input? Well, you can type in it. So here we're going to have kind of 2 objects inside of a component. And what's important about that is, let me put something in this box. And if you're wondering what this is, that's my like one of my character names that I've used forever. So so now we have these 2 kind of objects over here in the layers. Let me close this. So we want these to kind of always be together. So the way you do that is you select both of them. You can kind of click and drag, or if you prefer, you can click the layer and then hold shift and click the other layer. So now we have these 2 selected together, and we want to make what's called a group. So you can either hit Command G or Control G, or you can right click and group selection. So now we have a group, and we can name that group. This is input. And just before we make it a component, I can show you that you can actually align these things together using some of these tools. That's actually kind of off, so maybe we won't do that. Or you can drag and kind of see these little markers, which is like how it lines up relative to what is around it. So this is actually not what the the input text should look like. It was a little bit bigger, and it was not uppercase. And no letter spacing. I'll just put 0. Getting closer. All right. And then the text was kind of this beige color, which is hard to see. We can actually come over here back to the other page and copy this box. And we can put it here. And so here you see that if the layer order matters. So whatever's on top will actually be the furthest to the front. So if we want to see the input, we can actually move this underneath by just dragging it. So now we can see kind of what that looks like. So we can kind of drag that around. And now we can make it a component. So I'll just create a component there. Now we have 2 of them. So the same thing applies. We could kind of edit the color. I keep editing the wrong one. If we edit the main one, they'll kind of match together, which is really cool and really useful. So that's kind of like grouping with components. And then finally, we have buttons. So we need to make a button. And a button is actually super similar to an input. So I have this box. And if you've ever seen World of Warcraft buttons, they're a bit more complex than this. They have some texture, but they're these kind of like red things with a special border. So let's make that. So we have this fill that we're going to use, and we'll add a stroke. And I think it was kind of this gray color. And we'll also add an effect of a drop shadow. And we'll not displace it at all. And we'll give it a spread of 2 or 1. Trying to remember what I did here. No blur. And if we make this 100, I think we're getting close. So let's make the border radius a little higher. think it was actually 10. And I'm actually not sure. I may have to use this reference. So if you double click into components, you kind of you go like group by group until you get to the final thing. So I actually used 2 rectangles here. So I was close. So let's go back. We can dupe this rectangle. So now we have 2. And the top one will remove the fill. So now we get to see the drop shadow on both sides. So that kind of is a close approximation of what their buttons look like. Theirs are a little different, but we're missing one piece, and that's the text. So we can drag this in there, get something close to what we want, and we'll use the verb generate. And I think that's the right size, but we need to change the fill. So we'll use this white fill. And you can actually do text shadow. So in effects, we can go under and hit the plus sign to get a new one, and we'll do a drop shadow. We'll do 2. The blur is probably good. We just need to go a bit higher on their buttons are crazy. This is very old school, kind of clunky looking button. So that's pretty good. So now we can kind of grab all these and group them and make a component. And now we have our button component. So we can actually use this however we want. And let's say we had an idea for like a cancel button, like we had in the beginning slide. So we can go to this instance of the component and just edit it as we need. So if we just say remind, and maybe in our cancel button, we actually want to change the fill. And instead of red, we want gray. So we can do that here. I think it was darker. That looks right. So now we have 2 buttons, but we may need to use this cancel again. So we can actually make this instance of button a separate component, but it will retain some of the properties of the original component. So if we decided, well, we're switching our text to something different, to the new font, then we can do that and it'll cross to the other instances of this component. But this new one, and we should have called it something different, will actually keep its own changes. So it'll keep the gray fill, but it'll change the text. And so whatever you overwrite here will kind of stick, and whatever is left will be carried over from kind of the original component, which is very useful, especially for buttons. So let me undo that. Change and rename this like I just did. All right, let's keep going. So now it's time to make a layout. So the first thing we're going to talk about is spacing. So if I go back and grab, let me zoom out for you. Sorry. Hitting the wrong buttons here. Let's grab this. Or actually, let's just grab the box. And we'll put that here. And then we'll grab this text that we had as well. And sorry, I'm all over the place, but I need to grab a few pieces so I can show you this logo. So kind of have our title and we have our logo. So we can talk alignment a second, but first we can talk about spacing. So if we wanted this logo to be like 16 pixels from the top, we can kind of do that. So the way you do it is you select what you want and you put it kind of next to whatever you're trying to line it up with. You can hit Alt to see kind of the spacing relative to this logo. So you can see 60 pixels from the top, 98, 99 on the sides, and 232. And let's say we wanted to space this kind of particular distance. So maybe 10 is the right value. Let's actually go see what this was. So this was 5 and this was 16. Okay, so I was close. So let's move this up, and you can use your arrow keys if you need to like do 1 pixel moves. It's really helpful. This was actually over a bit. Cool. So let's grab this. Oh, wrong thing. You shall lock this. You can lock layers. So actually this kind of presentation stuff that I have is a locked layer kind of underneath. And that just makes it to where you can't select it. It just kind of hangs around in the background. So we're going to select all of this and we're going to copy it and we're going to place it. Alignment. So let's say we wanted to add some instances of the inputs, and let's actually grab that and put it over here. So let's say we wanted this input to be exactly in the middle of this entire kind of box. We can do that first by grouping everything. So now we have a group. We can call this kind of form, or whatever we want to call it. And let's say we wanted all of this to kind of line up centrally. So we can actually use these tools over here, and you can see this kind of maps to Flexbox if you ever use Flexbox. So there's like start, center, end, or left, center, right. So we use this now, everything will be kind of the center align. And let's actually open this up and let's do another input. So you can see these guides that always pop up. So these are another way to align things. Figma tries to match kind of edges whenever you're moving things around. And it also tries to match center lines. So like you could see the center line going down the middle, but you also see the edges on the ends of the input. So that will help you a lot. And there's some other alignment options to like distribute vertical spacing. Some of this is good to use, but it's you have to like group very closely together to really get a good use out of it. So we can actually, if I grab a label, and that is actually much too big. So let's go back and edit that. 12. That's better. So we can put this, and I'm getting some bad boxes, but I should be getting a line for this, and I'm not sure why we aren't. But let's actually take these to the label, we'll put it inside the group. And we'll grab this component, and we'll actually make this a new component. We'll call this form field, sorry. And we'll dupe it, and then we'll grab the original, put it over here. So you probably saw like we had both of these, or now it doesn't want to do it because it's a component. So like once you have a component, some of these things start to only show up for the main component. So if we select both of these, or not, here we go. See these kind of like little extra doodads. This is another way to like play with spacing, so you can actually like drag this out and get kind of exactly the space between two elements. And so this, I forgot what this bubble does, but for sure it like represents each element in a series. So if we delete this and we come over here and we make another form field and we can place it over here, you can see like we start to get these numbers, and that's kind of showing you like whenever it finds similar spacing between elements, those pop up. So now we have our two form fields. This box probably needs to be a little bit bigger. And we can kind of rename this your favorite dungeon. So you see that my text box is off because it's like centered. So if we go back to our component, something that's important is that you tell the give like your component constraints relative to kind of the grouping around it. So for this label, we actually want to say be constrained to the left side instead of being center. So if we go to center, you see like even though this text box grew, it grew around the kind of center of where it was placed. But if we switch it to the left, now it kind of holds up the same kind of alignment. So that's that. And you can see if we grab our two form fields and put them in a group, we have our fields, and we kind of get the nice like spacing. We can also, if we click in, let's say we did these kind of skewed like this, but we didn't like that. We wanted to be center. We could actually align the centers. Actually, that didn't work. I might have the wrong selections here. Sorry about that. Well, we'll abandon that for now, for the essence of time. So last thing we'll talk about is, I put images here, but I think that was a mistake. So let's actually move this form field out of the group. And we'll just take this along for the ride. So let's go to some more advanced things. Let's bring our form back in. So we have that kind of like thank you page with this cool like image, but it's like bleeding out. And we also got these like crystal things going on. So let's work with that. So it's actually not going to be this form. We can kind of delete most of the stuff in here. We just need the box. Oh, I deleted too much. So now we have the box, and we need our image, which was on the first page. So we can copy this and bring it over here. It's ridiculously large. So we'll pull it over, and it was a bit smaller. That's close. Keep going. That looks about right. So an image mask is where you kind of use some color and transparency to kind of make images transparent in like a certain place. So in this case, we kind of want to like feather these edges out. And I think we don't want crop. We actually want fill. And we want to go all the way to the edges. And be very flush with the top. So now we have our image, but we need a mask. So first part of that is adding another rectangle, which we can just align with the image. And here we want kind of that like rounded feathering. So this is kind of something you might not see quite in web development all the time, but there's a way to do it with SVG and I think another of the CSS filters. So you can use black, and you can kind of shift the gradients with these draggers. You can actually add more stops if you want to play with kind of how it feathers out. You can just keep adding stops, but we don't need that many. I think we just need the 2. So here we have that. If we zoom in so we can actually see, we need to group these 2 together. And now we can use as a mask. Actually, that's wrong. We go in the group. We want to use our rectangle, and I'm going to drag it underneath as a mask. So now wherever we had color before, we'll actually see parts of the image. And when there's transparency, the image will go away. So this is close. It's not quite what we had before. So the center was actually at the top. And I think it kind of came out like this. And you can control way over here to this dot. It's super hard to find. You can control the width of kind of this ellipse of a rectangle. So something like that. We might actually need another stop somewhere here to kind of extend more of that like visible color. Yeah, it looks better. Something like this. All right, so we're getting pretty close. We're missing a few things. So we're still missing our button. And yeah, okay. Let's get going because I want to have time for questions. Yeah, okay. So let's grab that and we'll grab our button somewhere. So we can add our button in here. We'll line it up just like this. You can kind of check the spacing, 20. If we actually get it into the form, the right form, somewhere around here. Now we'll get the spacing between everything. So it needs to go up. Well, it's close. You can actually make it, exactly even, but for time's sake, we won't do that. So in Figma, we have some primitive animations. It's not quite as full-fledged as the web yet, but we're getting there. So the way you do animations is you actually have, at least for like a button hover, you would have a separate instance of the same thing. And then you would add whatever changes you want. So in this case, we want the fill to be kind of highlighted. So we can actually change to a radial gradient. And we want, sorry, y'all. I think I actually added another layer for this. I can get it in. Might have to refer back to the original. this is my behind the scenes. Let's see. Okay, I just did a radial gradient. I'm missing something here. So if we do a radial gradient and we make the center kind of a little bit lighter color and the edges I'm not sure. Oh, that would help. So let's make this a bit lighter so it kind of looks like it's highlighted. This is how WoW does their buttons. They're not the prettiest things, but anyway. So now we have our original and our kind of hover state. So we can go up to prototype and add an interaction. We can do while hovering, and it's not giving me my options. Sorry, y'all, this worked when I did it before. So if you see in this, the one that I did before, under interactions, you get you can go to while hovering, and then you should get an option to do open overlay. And you can point that at your hover instance. And if you choose manual, that will put it kind of right on top. So to show that off, we can go to prototyping. So I'll actually pull this over, and that way we can all see exactly what this looks like. So this is kind of the whole thing. And I wish we could have gotten all the way through, but yeah, this took longer than I thought. So you can see on our button here, we have a click to, actually, let's use this button. So we add an interaction here, which you can use through here, or you can just drag over. You're saying there's going to be something to do with this button that's going to bring us to this frame over here. So in this case, we want on click and navigate to completed. So now that we have a prototype, we can go to play. And this should pop up with, we're missing our logo. Oh, there we go. So you can see if you hover over it, you see the little finger. I think I lost my hover somewhere. If you click, you can see the kind of interactive parts of the form. And so if you click it, it goes to your page. So this is super useful when you're kind of building mockups or anything for the web. You can kind of show kind of some primitive navigation and stuff like that, which is awesome. And let's go back to here. We're missing our hover. I really want you to see it. So if we add an interaction while hovering, and we open overlay to this generate hover and do manual. Okay, so now this should work. And you can change the kind of animation. There's some other options if you do a full frame over. We'll just choose dissolve, and 150 is probably fine. So now if we go to prototype, you get the hover, which is awesome. This is, I think, within the last few years. Like originally Figma didn't have kind of animations, and the prototyping was a lot simpler. So yeah, so that is the whole thing, the whole enchilada. I hope this was informative. We didn't get to completely build out the full form, but you can kind of see some of the pieces here, and I'm going to minimize this, bring up StreamYard somewhere. Well, I think I lost it. There we go. Okay. If we have questions, we can go ahead and do, yeah, we have 5 minutes.
Excellent work, Hunter. Thank you so much. No, it was wonderful. I think you made me a believer in Figma. So our
Awesome.
very first comment was from Daisy Nolan. Daisy, thank you so much for tuning in. She actually just had a comment that I had earlier too, is that we both had no idea that there was a desktop app. So, my question would be, do you prefer one or the other?
I normally use the web app just because I always have a browser open.
Same.
I think it can be nicer to use the desktop app just to get away from the rest of the world, which is nice.
Very true.
But you can do the same thing in both. So that's really up to you.
Good to know. So our first question is from Shruti. She just wanted to know how the Zoom worked. How do you Zoom anything?
I think I spoke incorrectly. It is Control on Mac, and I want to say maybe Alt on Windows. It's been a while since I've used it on Windows, so don't hold me to that. But you use that and then you scroll like with your mouse wheel.
Very cool feature in Figma. Another question comes from Bennett. Is there a way to include CSS SVG animations within Figma to then translate to your project?
That is a very good question. I want to say, let me check real quick. I think, I'm not positive, but I want to say maybe. There is a way, and I didn't cover it, but there is an inspect tool. But it's not super advanced yet. I don't think it has the animations. So I don't think so, but there probably is a plugin to do this. So check out, they have a lot of plugins. Yeah.
Very cool. Don actually just confirmed that it is Control on Windows.
Interesting.
So we answered that question. No other questions for now, and we are almost out of time. If anyone has any follow-up questions, make sure to contact Hunter at hmillerdev on Twitter. And thank you all for joining us. It was an awesome presentation, Hunter. We appreciate it.
Yeah,
we are
so much.
back 9:30 Pacific, 12:30 Eastern.
I do have one last thing to say. In January, I'm doing a intro to Tailwind CSS JavaScript marathon. So check that out. I'll probably talk about Figma a little bit because there is some interplay there that is useful. So
January 20th. So mark your calendars. We will be back. Hunter is now an official JavaScript marathon alum. We're happy to have you, Hunter. Appreciate it. Come back 9:30, 12:30, depending on your time zone. We are back with Joe Reckley, iOS, Android, and Web in One. So we'll see y'all soon.
Bye.